When humanity spoke no more, the Council finally understood Fear Part 1. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian, its domed ceiling displaying the swirling nebulas of 1,000 worlds. Representatives from 47 species filled the tiered seating, their various forms creating a tapestry of evolution's creativity. At the center podium, Chancellor Vextai of the Zephyrian Confederacy raised his 6-jointed arms for silence. The motion before us today, his translator rendered in perfect standard galactic, concerns the continued membership of species 847 Alpha, commonly known as humans, in this esteemed council. A ripple of chittering, buzzing, and harmonic tones swept through the assembly. The humans had been a curiosity when they first arrived 50 cycles ago, emerging from their small blue-green world with primitive chemical rockets and bold declarations of peaceful exploration. Their rapid technological advancement had impressed. Many their adaptability was remarkable, and their diplomatic skills had earned them respect across multiple sectors. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in the human delegation section, her weathered hands folded calmly in her lap. At 68, she had represented humanity for the past 15 years, watching as her species slowly integrated into galactic society. Beside her, her aide Marcus Torres shifted nervously, his young face pale as he monitored the data streams flowing across his tablet. "The charges are serious," Chancellor Vextai continued, his crystalline features reflecting the chamber's ambient lighting. "Violation of the non-interference directive regarding the Kepler 442 system, unauthorized military buildup in the Outer Rim territories, and most concerning, the establishment of what can only be described as black sites for research purposes unknown to this council." Ambassador Chen's expression remained neutral, though Marcus could see the slight tightening around her eyes. They both knew what was coming. Representative Zark Hoon of the Mollusk Collective rose from his thermal pool, water cascading from his translucent body. "We have documented evidence," his bioluminescent patterns flashing in synchronized communication, "of human vessels operating in restricted space. Their explanations have been insufficient." The avian delegate from the feathered worlds spread her magnificent wings in a gesture of agreement. "The humans speak much of cooperation, yet their actions suggest different intentions. We have observed military installations disguised as research stations. We have detected energy signatures consistent with weapons development." Sarah Chen finally stood, her movement deliberate and controlled. The chamber fell silent as she approached the speaking platform. Her footsteps echoed in the vast space, each sound seeming to carry weight beyond its simple acoustic properties. "Honored members of the council," she began, her voice carrying, clearly through the translation matrix, "humanity stands accused of actions that violate our sworn agreements. We do not deny that human vessels have operated in the territories mentioned. We do not deny that we have constructed facilities for purposes not immediately apparent to our galactic neighbors." A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembly. They had expected denials, justifications, the typical diplomatic dance of deflection and counter-accusation that characterized most council proceedings when violations were discussed. "However," Sarah continued, "we maintain that our actions fall within the bounds of the emergency protocols established in Charter Section 847 Delta, protocols that require no prior notification when the security of council space itself is threatened." Chancellor Vextai's head tilted in the Zephyrian expression of confusion. What threat could possibly justify such secrecy? Our long-range sensors detect no hostile forces. The border systems report normal activity. Our intelligence networks have identified no credible dangers to council territory. Sarah Chen paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembled representatives. She had hoped it wouldn't come to this, had hoped that humanity could continue its work in the shadows, protecting their newfound galactic family from dangers they couldn't yet comprehend. But the politicians and bureaucrats demanded answers, and perhaps it was time they understood the true nature of the universe they inhabited. "Honorable delegates," she said slowly, "what we have discovered in our research may disturb many of you. For the past 12 years, humanity has been tracking anomalous signals from beyond the galactic rim. signals that suggest the existence of entities that view organic life as we might view bacterial cultures. The chamber erupted in various expressions of disbelief. The insectoid hive queens clicked their mandibles in skeptical rhythm. The gaseous beings from the cloud nebula shifted their electromagnetic fields in patterns that conveyed amusement. Even the usually stoic Silicon Collective flickered their crystal formations in what passed for laughter among their kind. "Preposterous," declared Ambassador Thrix of the Reptilian Dominion, his forked tongue tasting the air as if checking for lies. "The galaxy has been surveyed extensively. We know what lies beyond our borders. Empty space, young stellar formations, and the occasional rogue planet." Sarah reached into her jacket and withdrew a small crystalline data core. This contains 17 years of accumulated evidence, signal intercepts, gravitational anomalies, and most disturbing of all, the complete disappearance of 3 star systems along our rimward border. She inserted the core into the chamber's central display system. Holographic images materialized above the assembly, showing star charts, spectral analyses, and electromagnetic recordings that painted a picture of something vast and incomprehensibly alien operating in the void beyond known space. "The signatures we've detected," Sarah continued as the data scrolled past, "suggest technology that operates on principles we don't understand. The missing star systems didn't explode or collapse. They simply ceased to exist, leaving behind gravitational echoes that fade a little more each year." Marcus watched as the mood in the chamber shifted. The initial skepticism was giving way to unease as the assembled representatives studied the evidence. The mathematical precision of the data was undeniable, even if its implications were terrifying. "Even if we accept this evidence," Chancellor Vextai said carefully, "why the secrecy? Why not bring this to the Council immediately? We have protocols for external threats, procedures for mounting collective defenses." Sarah Chen's expression hardened slightly. "Because, Honored Chancellor, every simulation we've run suggests that conventional Council response protocols would be inadequate. The entities we've detected operate on a scale that makes our combined fleets appear insignificant. Warning the Idas Noir general population would serve only to create panic, while providing no meaningful preparation for what may be coming." The silence that followed was different from the earlier skeptical murmuring. It carried weight, a growing understanding that humanity might have stumbled upon something that challenged the very foundations of their galactic civilization. Part 2. The emergency session reconvened 3 days later in the Council's secure chambers, deep beneath the capital city of Nexus Prime. Only senior representatives and their most trusted advisors were permitted entry. The usual grandeur of the main assembly hall was replaced by stark functionality, banks of quantum computers and holographic displays creating an atmosphere more suited to military planning than diplomatic discourse. Admiral Kethvar of the Unified Defense Force, an imposing figure even among the warlike draconian species, stood before the central tactical display. His scales, normally a deep blue-green, had shifted to the darker hues that indicated serious concern among his people. "The human data has been verified by our best analysts," he announced, his voice carrying the growling undertones that made universal translation struggle with draconian speech. 3 star systems, approximately 47 light-years beyond our furthest monitoring stations, have indeed vanished from all sensor readings over the past 23 standard years. Representative Mirashan, from the Crystalline Collective, pulsed with nervous energy, her faceted body refracting the display lights into prismatic patterns. "How does one lose entire star systems? Stars don't simply disappear. They follow predictable life cycles spanning billions of years." Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, humanity's chief xenoarchaeologist, activated a detailed holographic model. The pattern suggests systematic harvesting. Each system was stripped of all matter, from the outermost asteroid belts to the stellar cores themselves. The process appears to take approximately 18 months per system, and it's moving inward toward Council space at a steady rate. The assembled delegates studied the projection with growing alarm. The model showed a clear progression, 3 dark voids in space arranged in a line that pointed directly toward the galaxy's populated regions. "The technology required for such an operation is beyond our current understanding," Dr. Reeves continued. "We're talking about entities capable of disassembling matter at the atomic level and converting it into forms we can't detect or comprehend. Ambassador Chen activated another section of the display, revealing humanity's secret monitoring network. For the past 12 years, we've been constructing early warning systems and research facilities specifically designed to study this threat. The installations your intelligence services discovered aren't weapons platforms. They're observation posts and experimental laboratories. Chancellor Vextai's translator struggled with the harmonic frequencies that indicated deep concern in Zephyrian communication. Why didn't you inform the Council immediately upon discovering this threat? Because, Sarah replied with characteristic directness, the initial Council response would have been to form committees, conduct studies, and engage in the same diplomatic processes that have characterized every major decision this body has made. These entities, whatever they are, don't appear to recognize the concept of negotiation. The tactical display shifted to show electromagnetic readings from the vanished systems. The patterns were unlike anything in the Council's databases, displaying characteristics that suggested intelligence but operating on principles that defied conventional physics. We attempted communication, Dr. Reeves explained, highlighting specific signal sequences, multiple broadcast formats, mathematical principles, even artistic expressions. The only response was an acceleration in the harvesting process of the nearest star system. Admiral Kethvar's tail lashed with involuntary agitation. What capabilities have humans developed to address this threat? Your research facilities must have produced something more than observational data. Sarah exchanged a meaningful look with her technical team. We've made progress in several areas. Our understanding of these entities' operational patterns has improved significantly. We've developed new materials that seem resistant to their conversion processes, and we've identified potential vulnerabilities in their harvesting methodology. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled in. The normally verbose representatives found themselves confronting a threat that rendered their usual diplomatic solutions meaningless. "Show us," demanded Representative Zarkhun, his bioluminescent patterns flickering with urgent curiosity. Dr. Reeves manipulated the display to show a detailed analysis of the harvesting process. The entities appear to operate through some form of quantum manipulation, breaking molecular bonds and reorganizing matter at the subatomic level. However, our research indicates they require approximately 72 hours to fully process each planetary mass. "That's a weakness?" asked the avian delegate, her feathers ruffling with skepticism. "It's a limitation," Sarah corrected. "If we can disrupt their conversion process during that window, or better yet, present them with matter configurations that resist their harvesting techniques, we might be able to slow or redirect their advancement." Admiral Kethvar leaned forward, his predatory instincts engaging with the tactical possibilities. "You're suggesting we can fight these entities?" "We're suggesting we can buy time," Dr. Reeves replied carefully. "Our projections indicate that at their current rate of advancement, they'll reach the Outer Council territories in approximately 47 standard years. If we can double or triple that time frame, we might develop more effective countermeasures." The crystalline collective representative pulsed with rapid-fire calculations. The economic cost of such defensive preparations would be enormous. Entire sectors would need to be restructured, populations relocated, resource allocation completely reorganized. The cost of inaction, Sarah said quietly, would be considerably higher. The room remained silent as the weight of that statement settled over the assembled delegates. Each representative was calculating the implications for their own species, their own worlds, their own plans for the future. Chancellor Vextai finally spoke, his crystalline features reflecting the grim determination that was settling over the chamber. "What specific assistance does humanity require to expand this defensive effort?" "Access to the Council's quantum research facilities," Dr. Reeves replied immediately. "Cooperation from your military engineering teams. And most importantly, authorization to begin selective preparation of border systems for potential evacuation or defensive modification. You want us to approve the militarization of entire sectors based on a threat that may not arrive for decades," observed Representative Thrix, though his tone carried calculation rather than rejection. "We want you to approve the survival of galactic civilization," Sarah corrected. "The alternative is waiting until these entities reach populated space and then watching helplessly as they convert our worlds into raw materials for purposes we can't comprehend." "Admiral," Kethvar activated his personal communication array, "I'm calling for an immediate joint military assessment. Whatever these humans have learned, our defense forces need to understand it completely. As the chamber filled with the buzz of multiple species coordinating rapid response protocols, Marcus leaned close to Ambassador Chen. Think they'll actually cooperate or just create more committees? Sarah watched the controlled chaos of interspecies military coordination beginning to take shape around them. They're starting to understand that some problems can't be solved with diplomacy. That's progress. Part 3. The joint research facility on Kepler Station buzzed with activity that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Scientists from 23 different species worked alongside human researchers, their various environmental requirements accommodated by sophisticated life support systems that created a patchwork of atmospheric zones throughout the massive structure. Dr. Marcus Torres, now promoted to head of xenological analysis, stood before a holographic display that showed the latest intelligence from the RIM monitoring stations. The news was uniformly grim. 2 more star systems had begun showing the preliminary electromagnetic signatures that preceded total harvesting. The acceleration is consistent with our projections, announced Dr. Veltar, the Mantid Collective's premier theoretical physicist. Her compound eyes reflected the display data in complex patterns, while her forearms manipulated calculation interfaces with surgical precision. The entities are not slowing down despite increased monitoring presence. General Harrison Clark, the human military coordinator, studied the tactical implications with the focused intensity that had made him legendary during the border conflicts. How long until they reach the Proxima relay stations? 38 years, 7 months, Dr. Reeves replied from across the laboratory. Assuming they maintain current harvesting efficiency and don't accelerate further. The assembled researchers absorbed this information with varying degrees of alarm. For some species, 38 years represented multiple generations. For others, like the long-lived crystalline collective, it was barely enough time for a single planning cycle. Dr. Xinhai from the Aquatic Dominion activated her water-breathing apparatus before speaking. Our deep ocean research facilities have completed initial testing of the human-designed resistance materials. The quantum-bonded metallic matrices show promising results against simulated harvesting energies. Marcus pulled up the test results, feeling a surge of hope despite the overall situation's gravity. Efficiency ratings? Approximately 47% resistance to molecular disintegration, Xinhai reported. Not enough to prevent harvesting entirely, but sufficient to significantly slow the process. General Clark leaned forward with predatory interest. How significantly? Conversion time increases from 72 hours to approximately 196 hours per planetary mass. Dr. Veltar calculated rapidly. A meaningful improvement, but still not enough to create strategic advantages. The laboratory fell silent as the researchers contemplated the mathematics of survival. Even with their best defensive materials, they were only buying time, not creating genuine solutions. Dr. Reeves activated a new section of the display, showing recent observations from the automated probe networks humanity had deployed throughout the outer systems. However, we've made a more significant discovery. The entities appear to have some form of resource prioritization system. The new data showed harvesting patterns that weren't random. Certain systems had been completely ignored while others were stripped with extraordinary efficiency. The pattern suggested selection criteria that went beyond simple convenience or accessibility. They're choosing specific targets, Marcus realized, his excitement growing as the implications became clear. Systems with particular characteristics. Exactly, Dr. Reeves confirmed. High-energy stellar formations, unusual mineral compositions, and most significantly, systems with complex gravitational interactions. They seem particularly attracted to binary star systems with irregular planetary arrangements. Admiral Kethvar, participating via quantum communication from the Council Defense Fleet, immediately grasped the tactical significance. If we understand their selection criteria, we can predict their advancement routes and potentially redirect their attention. Dr. Veltar's mandibles clicked with calculation. More than redirection. If we can artificially modify systems to become less attractive, we might force them to travel much greater distances between targets. The concept was audacious in its scope. Deliberate stellar engineering to confuse or discourage entities that casually consumed entire star systems. Yet for the assembled scientists, it represented the first genuinely strategic option they'd identified. The energy requirements would be enormous, warned Dr. Zinhai. We're talking about relocating planets, adjusting stellar output, possibly even creating artificial gravitational anomalies. The Council has access to stellar engineering technology, General Clark pointed out. The Titan-class construction platforms were designed for exactly these kinds of large-scale modifications. Marcus was already running preliminary calculations. If we focus on systems along their projected path, create a corridor of unattractive targets, we could potentially force them to approach Council space from a much less direct route, buying us additional decades, Dr. Reeves added with growing excitement. Time enough to develop more effective countermeasures or possibly even understand their ultimate objectives. The Chamber's communication array activated as Ambassador Chen joined the discussion from the Council chambers. The political situation is becoming complicated, her image informed them. Several member species are demanding immediate evacuation procedures for rim territories. Others are insisting that defensive resources be concentrated around core worlds. General Clark's expression hardened. Either approach guarantees failure. Evacuation creates refugee crises that will destabilize entire sectors. Fortress strategies just give the entities free access to the outer territories while we wait for them to reach our final defensive lines. What's the status of the Council's decision regarding our stellar modification proposal? Dr. Reeves asked. Under review, Ambassador Chen replied diplomatically, which means various committees are arguing about costs, environmental impact assessments, and territorial sovereignty issues. Dr. Veltar's compound eyes reflected frustration patterns that transcended species barriers. Do they not understand that environmental impact becomes irrelevant when the environment in question is about to be converted into raw materials? They understand, Marcus said quietly. But understanding and accepting are different things. Most Council species have never faced an existential threat like this. Their political systems aren't designed for rapid decision-making under extreme circumstances. The research team exchanged glances that carried meaning across multiple evolutionary backgrounds. They were scientists and engineers, trained to solve problems through direct action rather than committee deliberation. How long would it take to modify a single star system using available technology? General Clark asked carefully. Dr. Zinhai consulted her calculations. For basic modifications that would reduce entity attraction, approximately 14 months with full Council industrial support. And without Council support? Considerably longer, Dr. Veltar admitted. But not impossible, assuming we focus on smaller systems and accept less comprehensive modifications. The implications hung in the air like a charged particle waiting for discharge. They had the technology, the knowledge, and the motivation to begin defensive preparations. What they lacked was official authorization from political bodies that seemed incapable of grasping the urgency of their situation. Ambassador. Chen's image flickered as quantum interference affected the communication link. I need to ask all of you a question, and I need completely honest answers. If the Council continues to delay authorization for defensive measures, are you prepared to proceed without official sanction? The silence that followed carried the weight of potential treason charges, court-martial proceedings, and exile from the galactic community. It also carried the weight of entire civilizations that might survive or perish based on their decision. One by one, the assembled researchers activated their personal acknowledgement systems, indicating their commitment to proceed regardless of political obstacles. Marcus was the last to respond, understanding that this moment would divide their timeline into before and after. If we're going to save the galaxy, he said quietly, we need to stop asking for permission. Part 4, the asteroid mining facility designated Lighthouse 7, drifted in the empty space between star systems, officially abandoned for 3 years due to resource depletion. Unofficially, it had become the coordination center for the most ambitious covert operation in galactic history. Commander Elena Vasquez floated in the facility's central control chamber, her magnetic boots keeping her anchored to the deck as she reviewed status reports from 17 different stellar modification projects. Around her, a carefully selected team of engineers, scientists, and military personnel from 8 species worked with the quiet efficiency that came from understanding the stakes involved. Proxima 7 modifications are complete, reported Chief Engineer Coramel, his insectoid limbs dancing across multiple control interfaces simultaneously. The artificial gravitational resonators are operational, and stellar output has been reduced by 37%. Elena nodded, updating the tactical display that showed their progress across the Outer Rim territories. Green indicators marked completed modifications. Yellow showed systems currently under construction, and red highlighted areas where they'd encountered unexpected complications. Problems with the Kepler-69 project? She asked, noting the persistent red status indicator. Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's astrophysics specialist, pulled up detailed readings from the remote construction site. The entities responded faster than our models predicted. We had barely begun preliminary modifications when they arrived and began harvesting operations. The control room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Their strategy depended on staying ahead of the harvesting progression, completing modifications before the entities reached each target system. Falling behind meant watching their defensive preparations be consumed along with everything else. How much time did the modifications buy us? Helena asked. Approximately 6 days, Dr. Kim replied grimly. The entities adapted to our changes within the first 72 hours and actually accelerated their harvesting rate, Commander. Torres's voice crackled over the quantum communication array from his position aboard the survey vessel Pioneer. We're seeing similar adaptation patterns at the observation posts. These entities are definitely learning from our interventions. Elena studied the tactical situation with growing concern. Their covert operation had been running for 18 months, successfully modifying 23 star systems and establishing monitoring networks throughout the Outer Rim. The results had been encouraging initially, with harvesting operations showing measurable delays and detours, but the entity's ability to adapt suggested intelligence far beyond their initial estimates. They weren't simply following programmed harvesting protocols. They were actively responding to resistance and developing countermeasures. Update from the Council chambers, announced Dr. Reeves, her image appearing on the primary communication screen. The official response to our stellar modification proposal has been delayed again. They're requesting additional environmental impact studies. The bitter laughter that rippled through the control room carried frustration from multiple species. They had been working desperately to save galactic civilization, while politicians debated paperwork requirements. Any word on the supply requisitions? Elena asked. Denied, Dr. Reeves replied. Official reasoning is that the requested materials and equipment exceed normal research parameters and require security clearance reviews. Chief Engineer Coromel's antennae vibrated with agitation. Without access to Council industrial fabrication systems, our modification capability is limited to approximately 40% efficiency. Then we work with what we have, Elena decided. How many more systems can we modify using current resources? The engineering team ran rapid calculations across multiple displays. 7 full modifications, Dr. Kim reported. Possibly 12 if we accept reduced effectiveness parameters. Elena weighed the options carefully. 7 fully modified systems might provide enough delay to develop better countermeasures. 12 partially modified systems offered broader coverage but uncertain results. There's another option, Commander Torres interjected from his remote position. The automated manufacturing facilities in the Cygnus sector have been offline for 8 years following the trade disputes. Officially, they're awaiting political resolution. Practically, they're fully functional and unguarded. The suggestion hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Unauthorized appropriation of Council industrial assets would transform their covert operation into outright rebellion. Yet the resources available in the Cygnus sector could increase their modification capability by several orders of magnitude. Security assessment? Elena asked. Minimal, replied Lieutenant Commander Zhang from the Intelligence Coordination Station. 2 patrol vessels on random rotation schedules. Standard automated defense systems that we could disable without permanent damage. Dr. Reeves's image flickered as quantum interference affected the communication link. Elena, I need to remind everyone that we're already operating well outside legal boundaries. Seizing Council assets would make us legitimate targets for military intervention, as opposed to being illegitimate targets for cosmic entities that view our entire civilization as raw materials, Elena countered. The control room buzzed with quiet conversation as team members consulted with colleagues at remote locations. The decision would affect everyone involved in the operation, from the scientific observers tracking entity movements to the construction crews modifying stellar formations. Voting, Elena announced. The results came quickly. 17 votes in favor, 3 opposed, 2 abstentions. A clear mandate for escalation, but hardly unanimous approval. Dr. Kim, begin planning for Cygnus sector operations. Chief Cormel, prepare equipment lists for expanded construction capability. Commander Torres, I need detailed intelligence on entity movement patterns and projected advancement rates. As the team scattered to their assignments, Elena remained in the central chamber, studying the strategic display that showed the slow progression of harvested systems moving inexorably toward Council space. Their modifications had achieved some success, but the entity's adaptation rate suggested that anything they accomplished would be temporary. The communication array activated again as Admiral Kethvar's image appeared. Commander Vasquez, I'm transmitting new intelligence from the Rim monitoring stations. The entities have altered their advancement pattern. Elena's stomach tightened as new data populated her displays. Instead of the steady, predictable progression they'd been tracking, the entities had begun moving in multiple directions simultaneously. Their harvesting operations now covered a front approximately 40 light-years wide. They're adapting to our modifications by increasing operational scope, Dr. Kim realized. Rather than being delayed by individual system modifications, they're simply harvesting more systems in parallel. Estimated time to Council territories? Elena asked quietly. 22 years, 4 months, Admiral Kethvar replied. Almost half our original projection. The control room fell silent as the implications settled over the assembled team. Their covert operation, successful by any technical measure, had inadvertently accelerated the very threat they were trying to contain. Elena studied the data for several minutes before speaking. New priorities, she announced. We stop trying to delay the entities and start preparing for direct confrontation. Chief Engineer Coromel's compound eyes reflected confusion. Commander, our analysis indicates that direct military engagement would be futile. These entities operate with technology beyond our current understanding. Then we develop understanding, Elena replied. The Cygnus operation just became critical mission priority. We need those manufacturing facilities not for stellar modifications but for building something the galaxy has never seen before. Which is? Dr. Kim asked. Elena activated the classified research files that Dr. Reeves had transmitted months earlier. Projects so speculative that even their covert operation had considered them too risky to pursue. Weapons, she said simply. Weapons designed not to destroy the entities but to communicate with them. If we can't stop them, maybe we can at least find out what they want. Part 5, the communication blackout began without warning on a Tuesday morning. Galactic Standard Time. Across 47 Council member worlds, every human voice simply stopped transmitting. Ambassador Chen's final message to the Council was delivered by her aide, Marcus Torres, who stood before the emergency assembly with a datapad containing humanity's last official diplomatic communication. Honored members, Marcus read, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Humanity formally withdraws from active participation in Council deliberations, effective immediately. We will maintain monitoring protocols and defensive preparations, but we will no longer seek Council approval for operations deemed necessary for galactic survival. Chancellor Vextai's crystalline features reflected the chamber's emergency lighting in harsh patterns. What does this mean precisely? Are humans severing diplomatic relations entirely? Marcus consulted his instructions carefully. Ambassador Chen's message continues. We are not abandoning our responsibilities to the galactic community. We are accepting them completely. The entities have accelerated their timeline beyond political solutions. Military action is now required. The chamber erupted in the cacophony of 46 species expressing alarm, anger, and confusion simultaneously. Representative Zarkun's bioluminescent patterns flashed with urgent queries, while the avian delegates' wings spread in aggressive display postures. This is unacceptable, declared Admiral Kethvar, though his tone carried more concern than condemnation. Military operations require Council authorization. Species cannot simply declare independent warfare. Marcus activated the chamber's central display, revealing data that had been classified until that moment. Humanity's military operations are already well beyond the preliminary stage. Our industrial facilities in the Cygnus sector have been operational for 6 months. Construction of defensive installations is 73% complete across the Outer Rim territories. The displayed information showed the scope of human activities with stunning clarity. Mining operations, manufacturing facilities, military installations, and research stations stretched across space that the Council believed to be empty. The humans hadn't just been preparing for war. They had been building an entirely parallel infrastructure, without Council knowledge. "How is this possible?" demanded Representative Thrix, his reptilian features displaying the biochemical markers of acute stress. "Our intelligence services monitor all military activities in Council space." "Council space," Marcus repeated carefully, "extends to the established border systems. Humanity's operations are taking place in unclaimed territories beyond those borders. Legally, we have violated no treaties or agreements." The distinction was technically correct but politically explosive. The humans had found a loophole in galactic law that allowed them to build military capabilities without Council oversight, simply by operating in regions that no other species had claimed. Dr. Veltar accessed her species' legal databases with rapid mandible movements. "The precedent is unusual but legitimate. Unclaimed territories fall under the right of development protocols established in the founding charter." Chancellor Vextai's harmonic frequencies indicated deep disturbance. Why the complete communication blackout? Why refuse to coordinate defensive preparations with the rest of the galactic community? Marcus hesitated before responding, understanding that his next words would fundamentally alter the relationship between humanity and the Council. "Because coordination requires compromise. Compromise requires committee decisions. Committee decisions require time we no longer have." He activated another section of the display, showing real-time intelligence from the Rim monitoring stations. The entities had not merely maintained their accelerated pace, they had increased it again. Current projections showed arrival at the Outer Council territories in less than 18 years. "The entities are adapting faster than our political processes can respond," Marcus continued. "Every day spent debating authorization costs us strategic options. Humanity can no longer afford to operate at the speed of diplomacy." The silence that followed was different from the earlier chaos. It carried the weight of species that were finally beginning to understand the true scope of the crisis they faced. Admiral Kethvar leaned forward with predatory focus. "What specific military capabilities has humanity developed?" Marcus consulted his authorization carefully. "General information may be shared. Specific technical details remain classified until the entities reach Council space, or until other species commit to active military cooperation." "Define active military cooperation," demanded the Admiral. "Full resource commitment to defensive operations. Suspension of normal territorial restrictions for joint military activities. Agreement to accept operational command structures based on tactical efficiency rather than political representation." The implications rippled through the assembly like shockwaves. The humans were demanding that the Council abandon its fundamental operating principles and accept what amounted to military dictatorship during the crisis. Representative Mira Shen pulsed with rapid calculations. The economic cost of such commitments would reshape galactic civilization. Entire sectors would need to be converted to military production. Trade networks would be disrupted for decades. "The alternative," Marcus replied quietly, "is that there won't be galactic civilization to reshape." He activated the final section of his presentation, showing projected battle scenarios that human strategists had developed. The images were stark and uncompromising. Entity harvesting operations reaching populated systems, defensive fleets overwhelmed by technology they couldn't comprehend, and evacuation operations collapsing under the sheer scale of the refugee crisis. Humanity's analysis indicates a 73% probability that conventional Council defensive strategies will fail completely, Marcus reported. "Our alternative approaches show significantly better prospects, but only if implemented without compromise or delay." Chancellor Vextai processed this information with the deliberate care that characterized his species' approach to critical decisions. "And if the Council refuses to accept these conditions? Then humanity will proceed independently," Marcus replied. "We will continue defensive preparations using our own resources and capabilities. We will share intelligence about entity movements and activities. But we will no longer coordinate our operations with political bodies that lack the authority to make rapid decisions under crisis conditions. The chamber, filled with urgent conversations as representatives, consulted with their home governments and military advisors. The humans had effectively presented the council with an ultimatum: accept military reorganization or watch humanity withdraw from galactic affairs entirely. How long do we have to decide? Admiral Kethavar asked. Marcus checked his chronometer. Humanity's communication blackout will continue for 72 hours. After that period, we will resume diplomatic contact only with species that have committed to active military cooperation under the new operational framework. As Marcus gathered his materials and prepared to leave, Representative Zarkun activated his translation matrix for a final question. What happens if humanity's military operations fail? What happens if your new strategies are insufficient against these entities? Marcus paused at the chamber entrance, his expression carrying the weight of conversations that had taken place far from council oversight. Then at least we'll fail while fighting instead of while arguing about whether to fight. The chamber doors sealed behind him with finality that seemed to echo throughout the vast space. For the first time in galactic history, a council member species had voluntarily withdrawn from diplomatic participation in order to pursue independent military action. In the silence that followed, 46 species found themselves confronting a question that their political systems had never been designed to address. How do you maintain democratic decision-making when democracy itself becomes a luxury you can no longer afford? Part 6. 18 years after humanity's communication blackout, the entities reached council space. The first indication wasn't an invasion fleet or a military assault. It was simply the absence of the Kepler 452 system during the routine astronomical survey conducted every galactic standard month, where a G-type star and its 7 planets had existed for over 4 billion years. There was now only empty space and fading gravitational echoes. Chancellor Nextan, who had replaced the retiring Vextai 5 years earlier, stood in the Council's Crisis Command Center, watching long-range sensor data that confirmed everyone's worst fears. The entities weren't approaching Council space. They were already consuming it. Estimated harvesting rate? He asked quietly. Admiral Kethvar, now showing the silver scales of advanced age, consulted the tactical displays with the grim efficiency that had characterized his species' military service for millennia. Complete system consumption in 68 hours, approximately 20% faster than their previous operations. The assembled representatives absorbed this information with varying degrees of panic and resignation. For 18 years, they had watched human activities in the outer territories through long-range sensors, observing massive construction projects and military buildups that defied every assumption about warfare and defense. But the humans had kept their word about the communication blackout. No diplomatic contacts, no coordination requests, no explanations of their strategic plans. The Council had been left to prepare defenses using their own resources and traditional approaches, while humanity operated in complete isolation beyond the rim. Status of Council defense fleets? Chancellor Nextan inquired. Fully mobilized, reported Fleet Admiral Zintara of the Aquatic Dominion. 473 vessels concentrated at strategic positions throughout the inner territories. All ships equipped with the latest shield technology and quantum weaponry. The numbers sounded impressive until compared to the scale of the entity's operations. Their harvesting technology could disassemble entire planets in less than 3 days. No conventional military force could match that kind of destructive capability. Any contact from humanity? The Chancellor asked, though he knew the answer. Negative, Admiral Kethvar confirmed. Long-range sensors detect human activities in the outer territories, but all communication channels remain silent. We don't even know if they're aware that the entities have reached Council space. Representative Narration pulsed with rapid calculations that betrayed her species' growing anxiety. Perhaps they've already been consumed. The entities might have reached human territory before approaching our systems. The possibility hung in the air like a death sentence. If humanity's 18-year military buildup had failed, if their alternative strategies had proven insufficient, then the Council faced the entities with nothing but conventional weapons and desperate hope. That's when the gravitational anomaly appeared. It manifested at the edge of the Kepler 452 system's former location, a distortion in spacetime that registered across every sensor array in the sector. The readings were unlike anything in Council databases, displaying characteristics that suggested artificial manipulation of fundamental physics. "What are we looking at?" Chancellor Nextan asked. The science teams worked frantically to interpret sensor data that challenged their understanding of reality. "Some kind of massive gravitational lens," reported Dr. Veltar, her compound eyes reflecting the impossible readings. But the energy requirements for such a structure would exceed the output of multiple star systems. The distortion began moving toward the location where the entities were currently harvesting a neighboring system. As it approached, additional anomalies appeared throughout the region, forming a complex pattern that seemed to focus gravitational forces in ways that conventional physics insisted were impossible. "We're detecting massive energy signatures," announced the sensor operator, "power levels that exceed anything in our databases." The tactical display updated to show new contacts appearing throughout the outer territories. Not ships in any conventional sense, but structures the size of moons that moved with purposeful intelligence through space that should have been empty. "Are those human?" Admiral Kethavar asked quietly. Before anyone could answer, the entity's harvesting operations stopped. For the first time since their appearance in galactic space, the mysterious beings that had consumed dozens of star systems simply ceased their activities. The electromagnetic signatures that characterized their conversion processes went silent, leaving behind only the partially harvested remains of a system they had been systematically disassembling. "What's happening?" Chancellor Nextan demanded. The answer came in the form of communication signals transmitted across frequencies that the Council's equipment could barely detect. Not directed toward the Council chambers, but broadcast toward the entities themselves. The signals carried mathematical structures of incredible complexity, patterns that suggested intelligence operating on scales that dwarfed planetary civilizations. "Someone is talking to them," Dr. Veltar realized. "The entities are receiving communication from... The sentence remained unfinished because completing it would require acknowledging what the assembled representatives could hardly comprehend. Humanity hadn't just built conventional military forces during their 18 years of silence. They had constructed technology that operated on the same scales as their cosmic enemies. The entities responded. Their own transmissions filled space with patterns that no Council computer could decode, electromagnetic symphonies that spoke of intelligence older than stellar formation, and purposes that transcended individual worlds or species. For 6 hours, the conversation continued across frequencies that required quantum computers to detect and gravitational lenses to focus. The entities and their mysterious correspondents exchanged information at rates that measured in petabytes per second, discussing concepts that the Council's greatest scientific minds couldn't even categorize. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the communication ceased. The entities resumed their harvesting operations, but with a difference. Instead of consuming everything in their path, they began selecting only specific materials from each system. Rocky planets were stripped of heavy metals while their atmospheres remained intact. Gas giants were partially harvested, leaving behind stable remnants that could support orbital installations. "They're being selective," Admiral Kethavar observed with growing amazement, "taking only what they need while leaving the rest intact." The implications rippled through the command center as the representatives realized what they were witnessing. The entities weren't mindless consumers. They were intelligent beings operating under constraints that could be negotiated, modified, or redirected through communication. Chancellor Nextan activated the long-range communication array, broadcasting on the frequencies that humanity had used during their negotiations. "This is the Galactic Council requesting immediate communication with human military command. We formally request information regarding the current tactical situation." The response came not in words but in data streams that updated every display in the command center. Detailed tactical analysis, entity behavioral patterns, communication protocols, and most significantly, a comprehensive plan for coexistence with beings that operated on cosmic scales. The final transmission was a simple text message, delivered in 47 languages simultaneously. Council territories have been designated as protected space. Entity harvesting operations will continue in unpopulated regions beyond the galactic rim. Formal diplomatic contact will resume when Council members are prepared to discuss long-term coexistence, strategies with intelligences that view stellar engineering as routine infrastructure, maintenance. Humanity didn't defeat them. Representative Zarkun realized his bioluminescent patterns flickering with amazement. They convinced them that we're worth preserving. Chancellor Nextan studied the data that continued flowing through the communication array. Information that would reshape every aspect of galactic civilization's relationship with the universe beyond their borders. And now, he said quietly, we have to decide what we do with neighbors who can build stars as easily as we build cities.